What if everything you knew about the gaming industry was an actual lie? What if all the companies you've been told to worship over the years aren't actually heroes in this whole equation, but actually villains? For years, the gaming media has painted a picture of who's good and who's bad in the gaming industry, but what if that narrative was never meant to inform you, but to control you? It's time to expose the uncomfortable truth behind gaming's biggest players and the deception that has shaped public perception for decades. Brace yourself, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. In the world of gaming, there exists an unshakable narrative, one that has been repeated so often that it has become accepted as fact. One company is seen as the underwhelming competitor, a company that cannot simply match the greatness of its rivals. Another is hailed as the undisputed king of gaming, while the other enjoys the love of nostalgic fans who believe the company can do no wrong. But what if everything you've been led to believe is a carefully constructed illusion? What if beneath the glossy advertisements, gaming awards, and enthusiastic gaming journalism, there lurks an unsettling truth? Just what if the companies you admire the most are actually not the industry's saviors, but rather the ones who have engaged in the most predatory and questionable of practices? What if the real injustice is that the one company making gaming more accessible, affordable, and being pro-consumer is the one constantly under attack? This video unveils the hidden corruption within the gaming world and exposes how media bias has shielded some of gaming's biggest companies from being accountable while unjustly vilifying others. Gaming consumers believe they have freedom of choice, but in reality, their decisions are heavily influenced by a carefully orchestrated media narrative that benefits the industry's giants. Gaming journalism, social media influencers, and corporate-backed campaigns shape opinions by reinforcing existing brand loyalties. Through biased coverage, they steer public perception towards favoring preferred and loved companies in the gaming industry, while casting others in a negative light to gain monetary compensation from the preferred loved companies and revenue-generating clickbait for their gaming journalism brands. This cooperation between gaming media, corporate interests, and toxic fan culture turns consumers into blind supporters who fail to question the ethics of their favorite gaming brands, and it ensures that bad practices go unpunished and pro-consumer efforts are ignored, stripping gamers of their ability to make truly informed decisions about where to invest their hard-earned money. Nintendo, widely considered a family-friendly gaming company, is loved by fans all across the world, but they have a long and disturbing history of ruthless business practices. The company aggressively pursues lawsuits against content creators, fan projects, and even tournament organizers who try to celebrate their games. Nintendo has routinely issued mass takedowns of YouTube videos featuring their games, including content that falls under fair use, such as reviews, walkthroughs, and parodies. The company's grip on its intellectual property extends beyond what most gaming companies would ever dare to enforce, especially when it comes to emulators. Emulators often serve as a means to preserve older games that are no longer commercially available. Nintendo's crackdown on emulation can hinder these preservation efforts, and Nintendo has also been caught being hypocritical over emulators as well. In early 2024, Nintendo filed a lawsuit against the developers of Yuzu, a popular Nintendo Switch emulator. The lawsuit alleged that Yuzu facilitated piracy on a large scale. The case was settled with the developers agreeing to pay $2.4 million to Nintendo and cease all activities related to the emulator. Following the Yuzu lawsuit, Nintendo targeted Rygynx, another open-source Switch emulator. In October 2024, after legal contact from Nintendo, the Rygynx developer team announced that the project would be terminated and that they will remove all related assets. During the lawsuits, Nintendo's top intellectual property lawyer, Koji Nishihara, acknowledged that while emulators are not inherently illegal, they can become so depending on their use, particularly if they bypass security features or facilitate piracy. Despite its public opposition to unauthorized emulation, Nintendo has utilized emulation for its own purposes. Nintendo's Virtual Console service on the Wii and the Nintendo Switch Online service offer classic games through emulation, allowing players to experience older titles on modern hardware. And reports have also suggested that Nintendo's museum exhibits in Kyoto, Japan, use PC-based emulation to show classic games, a practice that has drawn criticism given the company's legal action against third-party emulators. An article from PC Gamer highlights the contradiction in Nintendo's stance, noting that while the company claims that emulation stifles innovation, it has benefited from the emulation in preserving and monetizing its own classic games. But it doesn't stop there. Nintendo has a history of taking legal action against content creators to protect its intellectual property. While the company asserts that these measures are necessary to prevent unauthorized use of its content, this has in turn alienated the gaming community. Over the years, Nintendo has targeted YouTube channels involved in streaming or creating videos using ROMs of the games, and Nintendo has issued copyright strikes on these channels that can lead to channel suspensions for some creators. Nintendo has also a history of shutting down fan-made games and mods that utilize its characters or game worlds, regardless of whether these projects are monetized. This also includes fan-made demos showing what our favorite Nintendo games would look like in today's game development engines. The company has also targeted what appear in unmonetized YouTube channels that upload soundtracks from its games to preserve the soundtracks and music from the beloved classics. But again, Nintendo likes to issue copyright strikes on these channels as well. Now, if attacking your fan base wasn't enough for Nintendo, they're taking it a step further, and that's attacking developers. Nintendo and the Pokemon Company launched a lawsuit against Palworld developer Pocket Pair, alleging that they are guilty of patent infringement, despite Palworld containing significant differences from Pokemon games. This aggressive legal stance suggests that Nintendo seeks to eliminate competition rather than being innovative with its IP. With this lawsuit from Nintendo against Palworld, it is starting to set a very serious industry precedence. Nintendo has secured patents on specific game mechanics, such as aspects of the monster catching system in Pokemon. This strategy has been criticized for potentially limiting creativity and hindering other developers from exploring similar concepts. The patenting of fundamental gameplay elements by major companies, including Nintendo, raises concerns about the future of creative freedom in game development. Such practices may deter smaller developers from being innovative due to fear of legal repercussions. The ongoing legal battle between Nintendo, the Pokemon Company, and Pocket Pair over Palworld highlights a growing concern in the gaming industry, and that is the increased use of broad patents to control fundamental gameplay mechanics. While patents are intended to protect innovation, critics argue that companies like Nintendo leverage them to suppress competition, making it harder for independent developers to thrive. The lawsuit against Pocket Pair, centered on mechanics like creature capturing with spherical devices, reflects a broader trend where major corporations seek to monopolize game design principles rather than protect unique ideas. Nintendo's aggressive patent enforcement follows similar actions by other industry gaming companies, such as Warner Bros., with its Nemesis system patent, raising fears that creativity and innovation could be stifled by legal restrictions. Palworld's massive success, despite legal hurdles, demonstrates players' appetite for alternative experiences, but the lawsuit has already forced Palworld to change the game, reinforcing concerns that legal threats, rather than creative evolution, are shaping the industry's future. As of February 2025, the case still remains unresolved, with Nintendo expanding its legal efforts internationally by filing an additional 23 U.S. patent applications, which only one has been so far approved. But meanwhile, Pocket Pair has responded by yet again modifying Palworld's mechanics to address any further potential patent infringement issues, while trying to continue expanding the game's reach through new content and partnerships. The outcome of this dispute could set a precedent for the game industry as a whole, determining whether patents serve as tools for genuine innovation or as corporate weapons against competition. The behaviors with Palworld and patent enforcement are not the only forms Nintendo is shown of trying to control competition. Nintendo has also locked popular games behind expensive hardware, refusing to adopt cross-platform play or embrace cloud gaming, keeping players in a restrictive ecosystem that benefits them financially. And historically, Nintendo has imposed strict licensing agreements on third-party developers, limiting the number of games they could produce annually and creating control over game content as well. These practices have been viewed as limiting creative freedom and market diversity. In 2002, the European Commission fined Nintendo and several of its European distributors for colluding to prevent trade in low-priced products across European markets, which was a violation of EU competitive laws. In October of 2002, the EU Commission fined Nintendo and 7 of its distributors for engaging in anti-competitive practices between 1991 and 1998. Nintendo itself was fined approximately $152 million, while the 7 distributors that colluded with them were fined in total $19.2 million. The Commission's investigation revealed that Nintendo and its distributors colluded to prevent parallel imports, which is the practice of purchasing products in low-priced countries for resale in higher-priced markets within the European Economic Area. This collusion aimed to maintain artificially high price differences across European markets. For instance, Nintendo products were up 65% more expensive in Germany and the Netherlands compared to the United Kingdom. To enforce these market divisions, Nintendo and its distributors closely collaborated to trace and eliminate sources of parallel trade. Distributors who allowed such exports faced punitive measures, including reduced supply or complete boycotts. Notably, John Menzies, Nintendo's UK distributor at the time, was initially boycotted to compel stricter compliance with the anti-competitive agreements. In the end, the European Commission determined that these practices violated EU antitrust laws, which prohibit agreement that hinder competition within the internal market. The substantial fine reflected the severity of the infringement, the impact on consumers, and the significant market size affected. In response, Nintendo acknowledged that the distribution practices did not align with EU competition rules up to 1998 and implemented measures to rectify its distribution system in Europe going forward. While these actions paint a troubling picture of Nintendo's corporate ethics, the gaming media rarely scrutinizes them, and instead they remain comfortably hidden under the guise of fan nostalgia and childhood memories that we see every single day in numerous media publications. This brings us from the family-friendly nostalgic company to the king of gaming itself. Sony's PlayStation brand enjoys almost mythical status in the gaming industry, but beneath its polished surface lies a history of anti-consumer behavior and monopolistic practices. Let's start this conversation with the fact that Sony is the market leader, and when you are the market leader, you're able to set precedences all on your own with very simple decisions. Sony has steadily increased the price across its gaming ecosystem, affecting the cost of games, hardware, and next-gen upgrades, often with minimal media backlash. With the launch of the PlayStation 5, Sony raised the cost of first-party games to $70, with reports suggesting future plans to sell games in parts for up to $100. Hardware costs have also surged, including the PlayStation 5 Pro, which launched at $700, lacking essential accessories, and price hikes for the PS5 as a whole itself in regions like Europe, Japan, and the UK. Additionally, Sony's next-gen upgrade policies have also been criticized, with some titles requiring extra payments or seeing inflated base prices, such as the Horizon Zero Dawn remaster. Now, being the market leader has also afforded Sony other flexes in the gaming industry, and some of these flexes almost come off as being an industry bully. Sony has a long history of securing timed exclusivity for major third-party titles, ensuring that games release on PlayStation first before being available on other platforms, and these games sometimes appear on platforms years later. Some notable examples include Final Fantasy VII Remake, initially announced for the PS4, with no clear roadmap for Xbox available even years after its release. Forspoken, a 2-year timed exclusive for PS5, keeping it off Xbox until at least sometime in 2025, and Deathloop and Ghostwire Tokyo, timed exclusives that eventually arrived on Xbox, but only after PlayStation had a significant window of market advantage. This practice benefits PlayStation by driving hardware and ecosystem sales, as players wanting these major franchises at launch must buy into the PlayStation platform. However, it can also be frustrating for gamers who prefer other platforms, particularly when there's a lack of transparency on how long the timed exclusivity would last. And it also is interesting to point out that PlayStation has never once had to apologize for any exclusivity deals that are timed or permanent, for that matter. But in the past, Xbox has been put in a position where they had to write an absolute stupid apology letter for an exclusive. Back in 2015, Microsoft announced that Rise of the Tomb Raider was going to be an Xbox One exclusive. This was due in part partially to the fact that Microsoft helped fund a large part of this game's development, but when they announced the timed exclusivity, the backlash was immediate and intense. Many PlayStation fans and gaming journalists heavily criticized the decision, despite the game being a timed exclusive, later releasing on PlayStation and PC. Due to the backlash, Xbox leadership, including Phil Spencer, had to publicly clarify that the exclusivity was not permanent and even apologized for any confusion. But this has led to a complete double standard, where Sony frequently secures timed exclusivity for major third-party games like Final Fantasy VII Remake, Forspoken, and others, but the gaming media rarely pressures Sony to announce exclusivity lengths or even apologize for these timed deals. With this double standard, Sony has been able to control the narrative, where Sony's timed exclusives are often assumed to be full exclusives, allowing PlayStation to benefit from the perception that these games belong to the PlayStation ecosystem. Microsoft's timed exclusives are treated as a betrayal, even though PlayStation does the same or worse, considering Sony's alleged blocking of games from Game Pass altogether. The gaming media's response was far more critical of Xbox for a timed exclusivity deal than they were for Sony's many third-party exclusivity agreements altogether. As mentioned, beyond timed exclusivity and full exclusivity, there has also been allegations and reports that Sony actively prevents games from appearing on competing services like Xbox Game Pass. Microsoft, during its legal battle over the Activision Blizzard acquisition, accused Sony paying developers to avoid putting their games on Game Pass. This tactic has been seen as an attempt to weaken subscription-based competition across the industry as a whole, as PlayStation Plus continues to not offer the value that is offered in other subscription services, including Xbox Game Pass. While exclusivity deals are common in the industry, blocking access to rival services can be viewed as an anti-competitive measure that limits consumer choice. While it prevents gamers from benefiting from alternative business models such as Game Pass, which provides a library of games at a fixed monthly price. From a consumer standpoint, Sony's strategy creates the perception that certain third-party games are inherently PlayStation exclusives, even when they are technically only timed exclusives or could appear on competing services later. This lack of transparency can lead to misinformed purchasing decisions, reinforcing brand loyalty at the cost of competition. Two examples include when Red Dead Redemption 2 launched, physical PlayStation copies predominantly displayed a large PlayStation exclusive sticker on the front cover. However, the only real exclusive content was a minor in-game cosmetic item, a hat for the player's character in Red Dead Online. This misleading design made it appear as if the game itself was PlayStation exclusive, potentially swaying uninformed buyers. The fine print, which clarified the exclusivity, was limited to a minor in-game item, was barely noticeable. This tactic was likely aimed at reinforcing PlayStation's brand dominance and creating the illusion that Red Dead Redemption 2 was a PlayStation exclusive. This caused many casual consumers, especially those unfamiliar with the fine details of this exclusivity deal, to purchase the PlayStation version under false pretenses. The next example is the Xbox Destiny cologne debacle. This incident perfectly demonstrated how Sony controlled messaging influenced consumer perception. During the Destiny marketing period, Sony had a deal that gave PlayStation exclusive weapons, strikes, and other content before Xbox players. Microsoft attempted to promote Destiny on Xbox, but it was barred from marketing the game in any direct way due to PlayStation's marketing agreement rights. To work around this, Xbox UK cheekily listed a fake product called Destiny, the fragrance, a non-existent cologne, just to remind gamers that Destiny was in fact available on Xbox the same day it would be available on PlayStation, despite Sony's heavy branding. The fact that Microsoft had to resort to such an absurd workaround underscores how PlayStation's marketing deals restricted Xbox's ability to even mention a game would be available on its platform. Sony's control over the gaming industry has also been met with resistance to changing ideals, especially when it comes to stuff like crossplay. Historically, Sony was reluctant to enable crossplay between PlayStation consoles and other gaming platforms. This stance became particularly evident during the rise of popular multiplayer games like Fortnite. In 2018, despite widespread demand, Sony restricted Fortnite players on PlayStation 4 from interacting with users on other consoles. Sony Interactive Entertainment CEO Kenshiro Yoshida defended this decision, stating that the PlayStation 4 offered the best place to play and emphasizing a commitment to maintaining a quality user experience within the PlayStation ecosystem. During the Epic Games vs. Apple courtroom battle drama, confidential documents were revealed during the legal proceedings that highlighted Sony's financial reservations regarding crossplay. Sony implemented a cross-play revenue share agreement requiring certain game developers to pay royalties to Sony. This policy aimed to offset potential revenue loss when PlayStation users made in-game purchases on other platforms. For instance, if a game's player base spent more on non-PlayStation platforms, developers were obligated to compensate Sony, ensuring the company's revenue stream remained unaffected by cross-platform interactions. In 2019, Sony ceased allowing third-party retailers to sell digital game codes, effectively monopolizing digital game sales through the PlayStation Store. This move led to a class action lawsuit alleging inflated prices due to reduced competition in the market. In December 2024, Sony agreed to paying a $7.85 million settlement, but still continued denying any wrongdoing, but opting to settle to avoid future litigation costs. Poland's Office of Competition and Consumer Protection launched an investigation into digital game platforms, including the PlayStation Store, for again potential anti-competitive practices. This investigation focused on possible prohibited agreements or abuse of dominant market position. In January of 2024, the French Competition Authority fined Sony for abusing its dominant market position. The complaint, filed by an accessory maker named Subsonic, highlighted issues such as connection problems during console updates and challenges in obtaining official licenses for PlayStation 4 controllers. Sony's market dominance led to them to be an industry dictator, and that just didn't go beyond what they did in the courtroom and on their pricing structure. It also filtered down into development studios. From Software, the developer behind Elden Ring, expressed deep disappointment with PlayStation's handling of their game Demon's Souls. Sony's lack of confidence in the game's success led to its limited distribution, prompting From Software to collaborate with Bandai Namco for subsequent titles like Dark Souls. After Sony's acquisition of Firesprite in 2021, reports emerged of a toxic work environment marked by crunch culture and high staff turnover. Leadership changes and allegations of sexual discrimination and ageism further exacerbated internal challenges. Sony's recent strategic shift towards live service games has led to significant financial investments, yet the outcomes have been less than favorable. High-profile projects like Concord and The Last of Us Online have faced cancellations or underperformance, raising concerns about resource allocation and market strategy. Concord, developed by Firewalk Studios, was intended to be a flagship live service title. However, it was pulled from sale just 2 months post-launch due to poor reception, leading to the studio's closure. Development costs for Concord were estimated between $200 to $400 million, marking a substantial financial loss for Sony as a whole. But it just doesn't stop there. When The Last of Us 2 was announced, it was announced that there would be a Last of Us Online also coming down the pipeline for this game. So this promised anticipated multiplayer extension eventually faced cancellation after years of development and significant investment, reflecting the challenges Sony encounters in their live service domain ambitions. While Sony continuously invests money into live service games and their development, they also continue to ignore their fans' outcry. The outcry that fans want to see classic beloved PlayStation titles like Killzone and The Resistance: The Fallen Man and SOCOM revived. Fans have expressed a strong desire for these franchises to return, believing they could fill the void in PlayStation's first-person shooter lineup, especially with how Concord prevailed in the industry or lack thereof. But instead of listening to fans, they do continue pouring money into live service games, where they create the contrasting position of investing heavily into these games, which have faced cancellations and financial losses against a backdrop of fan interest in legacy titles, suggesting a potential misalignment in Sony's strategy and ability to listen to the fans. Additionally, Sony has a history of shutting down game development studios and laying off employees. Yet the games media often downplays or outright ignores these events compared to when competitors make similar moves. The recent closures of Firewalk Studios and Neon Koi after the disastrous Concord launch resulted in massive job losses, but coverage was limited and lacked the same level of criticism that we see when other companies downsize. Despite these issues, PlayStation continues to receive overwhelmingly positive media coverage, even when Sony is caught engaging in anti-consumer practices such as blocking crossplay, enforcing restrictive exclusivity deals, or shutting down studios with little transparency. The backlash is minimal. This allows Sony to avoid accountability while maintaining its carefully crafted public image, raising serious questions about biasness in gaming journalism and the industry's willingness to hold them responsible for their decisions. We've covered the family-friendly company, and then we covered the king pedigree of the gaming industry. But now let's get to the main subject at hand. The company that always seems to be caught in the crosshairs, the spotlight, the target of everybody's outrage, always being beaten with the biggest stick in the room. While Nintendo and Sony continue to engage in questionable practices, Xbox has pioneered consumer-friendly initiatives that should be celebrated, but instead they are continuously met with skepticism and hostility. Let's start with what is hands down the best value in gaming, bar none. Xbox Game Pass is one of the most pro-consumer innovations in gaming history, offering an unprecedented value proposition by giving players access to hundreds of games for a single monthly fee. In the 90s, a service like this would have been revolutionary and celebrated. Yet today, in 2025, gaming media and extremist fan circles have twisted the narrative into one of skepticism and fear-mongering. Microsoft has reportedly confirmed that Game Pass is profitable, with projections estimating that it will generate over $5.5 billion in revenue by 2025. Yet, instead of acknowledging this success, critics obsess over hypothetical financial risks for a trillion-dollar company that has more than enough resources to sustain and evolve its services. While most developers praise Game Pass for expanding their audience, ensuring financial security, and and breathing new life into their games. Gaming media disproportionately amplifies the rare instance of developers expressing concerns, as if one discerning voice negates the entire overwhelmingly support from Game Pass. Games like Crusader Kings 3 and countless others have thrived thanks to Game Pass, reaching wider audiences than they ever could before through traditional sales alone. And yet, every time a developer questions Game Pass's long-term impact, gaming journalists pounce, blowing these concerns out of proportion to paint the service as unsustainable or even harmful, despite the fact that no scrutiny is applied to similar services like Netflix, PlayStation Plus, or EA Play. The hypocrisy is staggering. When Sony or Nintendo implement consumer-friendly features, they are praised. But when Xbox does the exact same thing, something that actually disrupts the industry in a positive way, it is met with resistance, doubt, and outright misinformation. The real question isn't whether Game Pass is good for gaming, it undeniably is, but why gaming media and extremists seem so hell-bent on making people believe otherwise. As we recently saw with the This is an Xbox campaign where everything is an Xbox, Xbox has been at the forefront of cloud gaming and platform freedom, offering gamers unprecedented flexibility through initiatives like the Xbox Cloud Gaming Service and Xbox Play Anywhere. These services are designed to remove barriers and put gamers first. Yet instead of being recognized for the innovation, Xbox faces relentless skepticism and negativity from the gaming media and extremist groups. Xbox Play Anywhere, introduced in 2016, was a groundbreaking initiative that allowed players to buy a game once and play it on both Xbox consoles and PC with cross progression and shared achievements, something that should have been universally praised as a major step forward for consumer rights. Instead, the gaming media downplayed its impact while simultaneously applauding much smaller consumer-friendly moves from Sony and Nintendo. Then came Xbox Cloud Gaming, a service that enables players to stream games on nearly any device, from smartphones to tablets to low-end PCs, making high-quality gaming more accessible than ever. Rather than celebrating the fact that Microsoft is bringing console-quality gaming to people who can't afford high-end hardware or live in regions that don't have it, the gaming press constantly focuses on doomsday narratives, questioning whether cloud gaming is the future, or obsessed over Microsoft's financial risks, as if a trillion-dollar company can't sustain its evolving technology. Meanwhile, services like GeForce Now, Amazon Luna, and PlayStation's own cloud gaming efforts somehow escape the same level of scrutiny. The bias becomes undeniable when Xbox leads the charge in consumer-friendly innovations. The media nitpicks and downplays their efforts, while other companies get a free pass for doing far less. Xbox Play Anywhere and cloud gaming represent the future of gaming freedom, yet gaming journalists and extremists treat them as if they are experimental gimmicks or financial liabilities instead of the groundbreaking pro-consumer advancements that they truly are. The industry should be celebrating Xbox for making gaming more accessible, not trying to convince gamers that more choice is somehow a bad thing. Additionally, Xbox has been the undisputed leader in backward compatibility and game preservation, ensuring that gaming history remains accessible for future generations. While other companies have been content to sell remasters or abandon older titles entirely, Microsoft has made it a mission to respect players' past purchases and keep classic games alive. Since launching its backward compatibility program in 2015, Xbox has enabled thousands of games from the original Xbox to Xbox 360, Xbox One, to all be played on modern hardware, often with enhancements like higher resolutions, improved frame rates, and auto HDR. This commitment to preserving game history should have been universally praised, yet gaming media and extremists have downplayed its importance, twisting the narrative, or outright ignored it in favor of negativity towards Xbox. So instead of celebrating how Xbox allows players to revisit legacy titles without being forced to repurchase them, the gaming media often shifts the conversation to meaningless criticisms, questioning why every game can't be backwards compatible or that nobody plays older games in general, despite the overwhelming engagement numbers proving otherwise. Meanwhile, when Sony locks classic PlayStation games behind a paywall or on PlayStation Plus, or Nintendo drip feeds older titles through expensive subscription models, the same media outlets barely bat an eye. The hypocrisy becomes overwhelmingly staggering. Backwards compatibility, in the end, is about consumer respect and gaming history respect. Yet Xbox is the only major platform that has made true preservation a priority. Sony and Nintendo have made it clear that they are more interested in monetizing nostalgia than giving players access to their existing libraries. Xbox, on the other hand, has invested heavily in ensuring games from the past generations remain playable for years to come, free of charge. The media should be championing Xbox for doing what no other company is willing to do, but instead it continues its pattern of bias, downplaying one of the most important consumer-friendly initiatives in gaming history. From backwards compatibility to gaming preservation, we find ourselves at cross-platform play once again, where Xbox has been the driving force behind cross-platform play, breaking down barriers and giving players the freedom to game with their friends regardless of the hardware they own. While Sony and Nintendo initially resisted crossplay for years, Xbox led the charge by publicly inviting other platforms to join as early as 2016. Microsoft was the first major gaming company to embrace true cross-network play, enabling Xbox users to connect with PC players and even offering to work with PlayStation and Nintendo. Instead of celebrating this pro-consumer push, gaming media and extremists found ways to distort the narrative, downplaying Xbox's efforts and make excuses for Sony and Nintendo's initial resistance. The bias was on full display when Sony infamously blocked cross-platform play on Fortnite in 2018, even going as so far to block PlayStation accounts, preventing players from using them on other platforms. While fans rightfully called Sony out, gaming media downplayed the controversy, making weak arguments about business strategy rather than acknowledging that PlayStation was actively harming consumers. It was only after intense public backlash and industry pressure, led in part by Xbox, that Sony finally caved and allowed full cross-play, making Fortnite the first official game to connect Xbox and PlayStation players together. Since then, Xbox has continued to support crossplay across major titles like Minecraft, Call of Duty, Rocket League, and Apex Legends, while still leaving the choice up to developers. Meanwhile, Sony has not only been reluctant, but was even caught charging developers a crossplay tax behind the scenes, forcing companies to pay Sony extra fees to enable cross-platform features, something the gaming media largely ignored or excused for a long time. While Sony and Nintendo are often praised or excused for their anti-consumer practices, such as raising game prices, blocking crossplay, locking classic games behind paywalls, and securing exclusivity deals, Xbox is relentlessly scrutinized for even the most pro-consumer decisions. The gaming media amplifies Xbox's missteps while downplaying or outright ignoring similar or worse actions from its competitors. For example, Game Pass is constantly questioned despite its profitability and massive player support, while Sony's paid upgrades and expensive subscription tiers are defended. When Xbox secures exclusives like Starfield, it is seen as unfair, yet Sony blocking Final Fantasy VII Remake from Xbox is ignored. Even when Xbox pioneered crossplay and backwards compatibility, the media found ways to spin the narrative against them, favoring Sony and Nintendo's late and reluctant adoption of similar features. The Xbox tax isn't just about unfair media coverage, it's actively shaping public perception, making consumers question and undervaluing Xbox's contributions, while giving Sony and Nintendo a free pass for their restrictive business practices. It's a manufactured narrative that limits consumer choice and keeps the gaming industry from evolving into a truly pro-consumer direction. Sony and Nintendo's control over the gaming media ensures that every misstep Xbox makes is amplified, while their own transgressions are just brushed aside. This is why it is referred to as the Xbox tax, an invisible bias that holds Microsoft to a higher standard than its competitors. This, in the end, is the ultimate truth behind the Xbox tax, a carefully maintained illusion that benefits PlayStation and Nintendo while manipulating consumers through media-driven biasness. The gaming press, fueled by clickbait and tribalism, has become an extension of the console war narrative, ensuring that every Xbox success is questioned while every PlayStation or Nintendo move is celebrated. In the end, it's all about money. Gaming websites, influencers, and media personalities rely on access, sponsorships, and exclusives from Sony and Nintendo to keep their businesses running. This creates an environment where criticism of PlayStation and Nintendo is kept minimal, while Xbox is fair game for relentless scrutiny. We've seen how Sony's anti-consumer policies, such as paid next-gen upgrades, blocking crossplay, and timed exclusivity deals receive little pushback, while even minor Xbox decisions spark outrage. The negative Xbox narratives aren't fueled just by the media biasness. They are amplified by toxic gaming communities that feed off the misinformation created by them. The idea that Game Pass is unsustainable, Xbox exclusives are inferior, or Microsoft is buying the industry are all carefully crafted narratives that gain traction through repeated misinformation, where the reality, Game Pass is profitable, Xbox has delivered some of the highest rated games in history, and PlayStation has engaged in exclusivity deals for decades, but the illusion persists because of somehow the media selectively presents the information. Over the years, Sony and Nintendo have engaged in blatantly anti-consumer and even unethical behavior, yet the backlash is nowhere near what Xbox faces for even having the smallest misstep. Sony was caught charging developers a secret crossplay tax, yet the story was buried. Nintendo has repeatedly sued fans, shutting down community projects and raised prices on outdated hardware, yet the gaming press let it slide. Meanwhile, if Xbox even so much as delays a game or changes a pricing model, the outrage is immediate and widespread. This, in the end, is the gaming industry's great illusion. This carefully constructed media bias ensures PlayStation and Nintendo maintain their dominance, while Xbox is always seen as the underdog. Consumers are fed a distorted reality, one that keeps them locked into a cycle of misinformation, brand loyalty, and corporate favoritism. But as more gamers wake up to these tactics, the cracks in this illusion are beginning to show. The question is, though, how much longer can the game industry keep this deception alive? But in the end, what is the true answer to the question? Who is really the bad guy in the gaming industry? Who has been guilty of the deception as covered in the thumbnail? The true villain of this story just isn't PlayStation or Nintendo. It's the gaming media machine that thrives on division and deception. While Sony and Nintendo certainly exploit brand loyalty and media favoritism to maintain their dominance, it's the gaming press that has the most to gain from keeping the status quo intact. Gaming journalism in the end should be about informing and empowering consumers, yet it has become a tool for corporate interests and console war fanaticism. By amplifying negativity about Xbox while shielding PlayStation and Nintendo from criticism, the media ensures that the industry remains trapped in a cycle of misinformation, brand loyalty, and selective outrage. But don't count them out. Sony and Nintendo benefit from this bias, but it's the media that fuels the fire, ensuring that outrage, misinformation, and favoritism continue to dominate the gaming discussions. Every time Xbox makes a pro-consumer move, the gaming press either ignores it, downplays it, or spins it negatively, while similar actions on PlayStation or Nintendo's platforms are met with celebration or minimal scrutiny. Now it's time for gamers to wake up. The gaming industry is not the fair and balanced landscape it pretends to be. PlayStation and Nintendo have long manipulated gaming media, exploited consumer loyalty, and fostered console war extremism to shield themselves from criticism while unfairly smearing Xbox. But this illusion only works as long as gamers allow it to. We must recognize the patterns of misinformation and manipulation. We must challenge the biased narratives that we are fed, demand accountability from the gaming media, and hold every company to the same standard, not just the one the press deems an easy target. Xbox has proven time and time again that it is pushing the industry forward through innovation, accessibility, and consumer-friendly practices. Yet it continues to face a relentless uphill battle against an industry unwilling to embrace change. Gaming should not be about console loyalty or media narratives. It should be about what's best for the players and consumers as a whole. Only by breaking free from this illusion can we create an industry that truly prioritizes fairness, innovation, and consumer choice. So the next time you see another anti-Xbox headline or a PlayStation praise piece, ask yourself, are you really seeing the truth? Or are what you seen what they want you to believe? So everyone, here it is. Thank you for sticking with me through this whole thing. Now it's your turn. Have you noticed the gaming media's bias against Xbox? Do you see the double standard when it comes to PlayStation and Nintendo? Please drop a comment below and let's expose the truth together. The more we call it out, the harder it will become to ignore. And if you're done with the misinformation and you really want real unbiased gaming coverage, hit that like button and share this video, and be sure to subscribe because the conversation does not stop here. So thank you once again, everybody, for checking out the video. I am Centurion1307. On this channel, we like to explore the gaming industry and gaming news with facts, logic, and sometimes a little bit of satire. And this is where I have to remind you to always question the narrative and be a critical thinker for yourself and not let anybody tell you how to make your own decisions. So until next time, everybody, I look forward to seeing you in the next video.